Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside you guys. Happy summer to all of you over here in this part of the world. We are feeling it this week, so stay safe, stay hydrated. It is going to be near 100 degrees Fahrenheit today. You take out your calculators for all you Europeans and actually the rest of the world. That's not the United States. You guys can figure that out temperature wise. Celsius, not a sponsor. Anyways, Santangelo, how are you? Are you ready to get things kicked off summer wise?
I am battling a little bit of like allergy/cold, which is odd. It's like the weird time of it.
Allergies are now pushed back into this time of the year for a lot of
Yes.
people
And
who
I don't
don't
normally
understand
suffer
what
from
they are.
allergies like this, but I went to work yesterday and all of a sudden I started getting like that congestion and like the runny nose, and I was like, this is probably the worst time for it between
Save
that
the
and the heat.
bees.
It's not a pleasant time, but hopefully we'll cover some topics and maybe there's some positive movement on the market for Milan that
Yeah.
will help with that.
Save the bees, man. That's what
Yeah.
happens. Okay, so we'll just get into multiple topics today regarding all this. We just want to say once again, thank you all for the support. Last episode with Enrico was great. It was our second one with him. Again, now as well, if you are new, if you don't have English as your primary language, it is very important to note that we do have a translation button in the captions. So you are able to read whatever language you want to listen to right now. So go ahead, click it. It's in the bottom, and you will get your translation there if you are not fluent in English or comfortable enough to listen in English. And vice versa with Enrico's channel. Enrico was a great guest. It was one of our better podcasts. So again, don't forget to do that as well. And check out the video I did yesterday on Theo Hernandez, which we'll hop right into right now to get a deeper conversation in general about this. So Theo Hernandez, highly looking likely that he is on his way to Al Hilal. I was talking about it last week on the last time we discussed this and regarding Theo in the sense that he had no options. Atletico wasn't going to pay up. And if Atletico, in my opinion, Matt, had thought Theo was still at the elite level, they would have forked over a few million more because that's how valuable he is as opposed to this situation winding on down to what it is. I think a lot of people with other top clubs, they also don't need a left back. They also see Theo's age, the amount of minutes that he's played, his regression, his attitude has been poor. But still, nonetheless, on his day, he is still a top player. This is why Al Hilal are looking to close this one for around 30 million with the bonuses included for Theo Al Hilal. Want to talk about this move first and foremost, and then we'll kind of get into his legacy at the club. So again, this was a boiling point for Milan. Either he stays on for one more year or they can get a figure very high. He goes to play with Simone Inzaghi, someone he is obviously familiar with within Serie A. So Matt, Milan on paper making out okay with 1 year left on the deal for Theo and one that seemed like a guarantee to leave. A little similar, not as similar to Magnan's situation, but Theo Hernandez leaving for 30 million euro with 1 year left on his deal. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not the ideal fairy tale ending that maybe Milan fans would have hoped, right? Player that stays for 7, 8, 9 years, he wins a bunch of trophies, and he kind of goes out quietly, maybe towards the end of his contract, or maybe similar in a similar fashion to what maybe what De Bruyne at City was. Not obviously the amount of trophies, of course, but in that fashion, contract runs down. It's understanding mutually to part ways, and he goes on and he has a different chapter in his career elsewhere, right? But I think this one feels disappointing. I mean, obviously, we've discussed Theo and the points you just mentioned, hit the regression, the standstill when it came to the renewal talks and all those sorts of things. And I understand people are kind of posting their heartfelt messages and they're still romanticizing about the peaks of his playing days at Milan, and rightfully so. I find myself kind of going down that wormhole too, right? Of just content binging of some of the great moments he's had here. But I think the truth of the matter is this, I think in an ideal world, you would have loved to keep this marriage going. Obviously he was one of the first people to commit to the project back in 2021 or 2022.
Different project.
2026, right? And I think that if Milan were able to get him renewed at a little bit higher of a figure than what he was currently out, but nothing outrageous, because I think truthfully his performances and behavior hasn't really justified such an outrageous wage, then I think people would have been okay with that. But I think that when you look at the landscape of how the breakdown of this of these talks have occurred, I think this is a fitting end to it. Milan get a fee that no doubt is enough to go back into the market and get maybe not an ideal replacement or like the quintessential replacement, because I think, to your point, on his day when he was motivated and had that desire, Theo was unplayable. It's him and Rafa on the left side. That was such a strong element to what Milan were all about in this prime era with them two at the club. But 30 million is a good fee. He's Al Hilal's pretty much quadrupling or 5 timesing his salary. I think it's 20 million per year. Mm-hmm. That's obviously not something Milan were able to do. And even then, reports were saying that he wanted upwards of something closer to 7 or 8 million. Milan weren't going to do that. Milan got the most they could, in my opinion, out of their out of this deal, with 30 million again coming back to us. And it's just going to be really ultimately a matter of whether or not Milan invests this, right? Because I think, to quote the famous Bader, right, with that video he posted when Tonali got sold, someone somewhere got a wire for 60 or 70 million. Until Milan fans see what this 30 million turns into, Theo, whether it be in the defense or other departments of this club, people are going to have their suspicions. They're going to have their doubts. And ultimately, people might judge this sale differently. Because if they go out there and spend 20 million on a player and he flops or gets injured or whatever, doesn't live up to the potential, people are going to say they turned Theo into this player who did nothing for us. So that's kind of how I feel. I obviously wish him all the best. I hope he wins a lot of trophies abroad. And who knows, maybe we see him back in Europe, because I think that, as we've seen with other high-profile sales to Saudi, these players come back within a couple years. He might go 2 years, get his bag, 20 million a year, and then wind up at maybe 28, 29, 30, coming back to Europe and playing somewhere. Because provided Martino, he shows the same level of intensity, playability, all those sorts of things that we saw at Milan towards the front end of his tenure here.
Which is already a couple years ago.
Yeah.
For me, I think a lot of people are conflating their feelings and contempt towards this management as opposed to what this situation really is, if it would happen under any management. The things that Theo Hernandez could control, and I gave him plenty of flowers, and I will continue to give him the flowers when we talk about the legacy in a moment here. But people have to stop pretending that this was the same player that we got when he arrived. Asking for a lot more money when no one else within Europe was willing to do that, or even pay at least 20 to 25 million for this player, is damning. It says a lot. Sure, you can maybe say that some clubs don't know what they're doing in that regard, but there was obviously a steep decline here. There's been a lot of minutes tacked onto this player. Mm-hmm. Okay, so people have to understand that they don't view this the same way that you view it. He's a player in his late 20s already. And as we've seen, it's not quite the same level as a Barella, and Barella is still a very good player. But we see what happens when players consistently and constantly play a lot of matches late into their 20s. They tend to burn out. And a player with this style and the way his game is predicated on a lot of power, a lot of physicality, pace, ball carrying ability. You can't just be sprinting 60, 70 yards with the ball every single year, week in, week out, with limited rest. Now, Milan are culpable for not getting a proper backup throughout the duration of his tenure at Milan. We understand that. However, how are we ignoring leadership issues this year? If we're just talking about straight up leadership issues, for me, people want to say, oh, well, Milan created this environment for Theo Hernandez. Quite a few players did not have the attitude issues on the pitch that Theo Hernandez had. And they were all under the same management. There's ways of being professional and unprofessional. Mm-hmm. I found a lot of the time this past season, in the past 18 months, Theo Hernandez was not professional. There was multiple instances this past season in which he did that on top of poor play. And even the season prior, in Pioli's last year, there were signs of decline. And it wasn't that good of a season. Sure, Milan's play as a whole definitely affects that, but his play takes a part in it. And I think that when somebody of his caliber shows a lot of negatives in the things that he controls, mm-hmm. I'm not just here to give him whatever he wants. I see people saying, give him the 7 million, give him to 8 million. Why? What has he earned to deserve that? I think he's earned quite enough on his track record to get 6.5 million. But if we're talking about highest paid player here, I'm sorry. I don't see how he warrants that. And a lot of other top clubs did not see that too. That's why he's on his way to Saudi. He had to accept this deal at a certain moment in time. He had to be convinced of this because he thought he was better than he was. And he's culpable for why this relationship is fractured. The same thing with the management, doing a really poor job. It's the entire entity that is Milan that is causing part of this. And Theo actually hasn't held up his part of the bargain. You can say what you want about Magnan, inconsistent play sometimes. We never had to put into question his work ethic and where he is on the pitch and what he's doing from an attitude standpoint. Theo does a really poor job this past 18 months for someone who was supposed to be a captain and leader on the pitch. We said it the entire time, all season long. Where's the leader out there on the field? That isn't Mike Magnan, who's the goalkeeper at the back. Where's that leader? Theo was not one of these guys. Leao was not one of these guys. Pulisic, we know how he operates. For me, I don't understand why I think people hate management so much that they decide that no matter what happens with a player that they love, they should give in to every single demand that player wants, just because management doesn't see it the way you see it. Because we might agree with management, that's a bad thing, and that we can't agree with this move to let him go. Yeah. I think it's a little silly. To keep him is one thing, to give him whatever he wants is also ridiculous.
Yeah, I think my final point on this is, you can appreciate, love, admire what was Theo at Milan, while also admitting to yourself and to the entire world about the sheer fact that he has regressed in play. He hasn't performed at a level that is able to justify the demands that him and his agent are demanding as part of a renewal. They're not mutually exclusive, guys. You guys can say, hey, I appreciate Theo and all he did in the Scudetto year and all those moments of brilliance with him and Rafa on the left side, while also acknowledging the fact that this is a player that, had a lot in his own end as far as what he can control. I know last year was a very difficult season. It was a horrible season. But you could still go out there and carry yourself with a top-end character, professionalism, as you mentioned, and still lead by example. And I think in that season that we just had, you almost would have gotten and taken a little bit more from his inability or ability to step up that he obviously didn't fulfill on, to be a leader. Because it's easy when you're winning to show up and give everyone the pep talk and lead by example, right? Everything's good. We're winning games. We're competing. It's another when the going gets tough to still be like, hey, guys, we have things to play for. This is Milan. We play with a lot of pride. We play with a lot of honor and respect when we put the shirt on. Let's give the fans something to cheer about. Let's give the fans something to be happy about in such a dire situation. And I think that's kind of what that's sort of like my lasting feeling on it was, when the going got tough, you didn't see a player like Theo step up and rise to the occasion. Not saying every player has to be this big time vocal leader and all of a sudden be this guy barking orders, but in some of those more delicate parts of the season last year, in the Champions League games and, when we were in a massive skid and we were still trying to cling on to any hopes possible to get into Europe, that's where you wanted to see Theo rise to the occasion. That's where you wanted to see Theo earn a little bit more and say, hey, this is a guy that looks like he's fighting for his renewal. He actually looks like he wants to be here, despite some of the conversations in the media, despite his regression that has been noticeable. And we didn't see that. And truthfully, maybe he got a little disinterested. Maybe the whole renewal talks kind of wore him down. I don't know. But what any case may be, I think that Milan at this position, this point in time, knew they weren't going to get a renewal done. They knew the player wanted more. They weren't going to come up to that number. And we wish them all the best. Hopefully Milan takes this 30 million that they're going to get, puts it back into the market, and adequately can replace someone like Theo, who, again, on his day, was arguably the best left back in world football.
Yeah, and I think my final point on it, too, was just that. Just because you think it's okay to move on from a player doesn't mean that you think that they're going to have a great replacement. And I know some people are sitting there saying, well, like, how could you want to get rid of him if you know that they can't replace him? Well, that's not a reason to keep somebody on with this attitude. every negative moment, as you were mentioning there this season, Theo was at the forefront of. Every massive negative moment, for the most part, Theo Hernandez is right there. And in moments of difficulty, you need a reference point for your leaders. He was anything but that. And that's what I'll say for that season. As a whole, with his legacy, like you were saying, on his day, best left back in the world. For modern fullbacks and what is asked and required of them, this guy answered the bell multiple times over multiple seasons. Like we were saying, it's commendable to never rest the way he did. Stupid in a long-term strategy, but what he was able to do week in, week out, there was never a fullback like this at this club with his offensive prowess. All-time leading goal scorer in Serie A for goals for defenders at this club. And I know defending was a lot different back then,
Yeah.
and it transitions over the years. But what he was able to do in such a short amount of time to beat Maldini's record, which he was poetically the one to sign Theo in the first place, and one of the best deals I think Milan have made in the past 20 years, let alone, 2010 and on. I think this player was amazing. He still had a lasting moment with the Supercopa, even though, it's still a small trophy in a way. But again, everybody will forever remember that goal against Atalanta, the year that they won the Scudetto. That was one of the greatest goals in club history in the moment and what it meant. And I loved it. It was great. I love this player. I hate the way that he ended up doing things towards the end of his tenure. But ultimately, this is one of the better Milan players of the past 15 to 20 years. And we salute him for a great career here at Milan. Get the bag. Enjoy your money, my man. That is quite a lot for tax-free. So we'll see what happens. And hey, he had to make a decision lastly in a World Cup year to go somewhere. He knew what his options were. Maybe he gets back into shape, gets a better positive mindset, and he ends his career on a high. But once again, I thank Theo Hernandez for all the memories that he made, positive and negative. Just one of those guys that you love to have him on your team and you hate to not have him. So thank you, Theo. Your thoughts on Theo Hernandez's legacy at Milan?
Sure, I'll try to make it pretty brief. But I think for all the frustration that we saw with him this past season, I think we can't lose sight of how great he was and how prolific he was in Milan getting back to being a team that was a regular competitor in the Champions League and that was able to shoot for a Scudetto and achieve that a short time ago, right? I mean, the goal that you mentioned against Atalanta, that was like Theo personified, right? Carrying the ball, fending off defenders, using his physical prowess, his strength, that engine that he had that, frankly, I haven't seen in quite some time from the left back position.
Yeah.
Cutting in, great finish at the San Siro. I mean, that's such an iconic moment, and I think more so even the rivalry between him and Denzel Dumfries, right, in that Scudetto winning season, and the seasons after, where he got that red card because he understood in that moment he needed to make a sacrifice for his team. And it sounds crazy, right? Because for what we criticized him for last year and getting a red card in the Champions League, different circumstances, of course, he understood that he's going to lay on the sword in that battle against Denzel Dumfries, gets the red card, gets in the face. And those were some of those like igniter moments that sort of galvanized the group. And I think there was a time and place for his intensity. It was more so we were looking for some controlled chaos at times last year, whereas in previous years, that's exactly what we got, right? In many ways, similar to the ilk of Gennaro Gattuso, where he'll go in, he'll defend you, he'll shove a player. But man, the intensity is always going to be there. The durability was always there for Theo Hernandez. I know Kush brought up a good point. This is a player that always posted. He always was featuring at the left back position, despite not having an adequate left back to kind of give him a breather. So I think again, we can acknowledge the faults of more recent memory with him, while also appreciating what Theo brought to this team during his tenure here at the club. And as I mentioned, we wish him all the best. This is a player that we're always going to still have that sort of soft spot in our heart for, because he was at the very heart of Milan's revival. And maybe one day we see him back at Milanello, bumping heads with a lot of the other players and all that stuff, and maybe things change in his career. But again, wish him all the best, and we will definitely appreciate what he did.
Yep. Never forget when we met Baresi that night he debuted against Bayern in the United States. Instant impact.
Yeah.
So much bigger news in terms of the transfer market. There is finally a solution that is coming to head here with Francesco Camarda. It looks like he's on his way to Lecce, with a loan deal that has an option for Lecce to buy the player, and then Milan with a buyback. Again, Ali Fisher going to detail it even further for Sempre Milan. So check out their stuff and his article that he's going to be dissecting the deal. Again, we've seen this happen with Brahim Diaz. We've seen it happen currently with Alex Jimenez as well. I think Milan see a buy option for a club here in this situation with Camarda, and everything that is going around with the narrative of management, and everyone automatically assumes this player's gone for good, which is a complete exaggeration, overblowing of the situation. Truthfully, really not rooted in reality. And I understand where everyone's coming from an emotional standpoint. They see their young starlet being sent out, and there's a buy option involved, thinking like, he's gone for good, he's gone forever, they're going to resell him to somewhere else. That's not how this works. That's not how that ever worked, guys. Calm down. Take a breath. There are two sides to this. There is the aspect of, does Lecce really have a squad that and style that fits for what Camarda can do? Can he develop under this system and develop good habits so when that he does return to Milan, he is ready to go for next season? I truthfully think that any striker in any system should be able to get theirs because of their intelligent runs and so on and so forth. The amount of chances created by a team is always relative to the amount of talent that they have and their system. They were flirting with relegation. They've had strikers in the past have some success over there. Colombo had a pretty decent loan. We saw Kristovic this past season, which is kind of a hot name on the topic of the transfer market in general, not just with Milan. For me, Francesco Camarda had to go and play. I would have liked to have seen him potentially getting a chance at the backup striker position with Milan currently, maybe see what he has there. But ultimately, Milan realized that they have to make top four, and they view Camarda, the situation of playing once a week, where they sit in terms of goals and what they have to reach next season. It's probably best for all parties involved for him to go out and play and then come back. Do you love this fit for Camarda in terms of a club? And do you agree with him going out on loan, or would you have preferred to keep him?
I think keeping Francesco Camarda wasn't really a realistic option, because I think that you're looking at the way Allegri and Tare are approaching the market and the way they want to build and construct this team. This is a team that is only featuring in one competition. And you have a striker on the books in Santiago Jimenez. Luka Jovic, he's gone. His contract ran down. Milan had the option to pick him up for a further year. They neglected to do so. Tammy Abraham, wages are high, unlikely to stay. It's a new regime, new coach, whole new system. He's not coming back. So between having Santi, who probably is still going to be viewed in preseason by Allegri, and this sort of undying transfer wave surrounding them wanting to get another striker, you have to ask yourself the question, okay, well, we want to keep Camarda, fine. How many minutes is he going to play? How many minutes can you guarantee him at 17? And this is a player, again, very young. Totally understand that. He's got a lot of growth to do. He has a lot of great years, hopefully, ahead of him. But if you're being honest with yourself and you're saying we get two pretty high-end, expensive strikers that will start for us, and we feel certain we can give him enough minutes to continue to develop, I don't feel like we could have done that. If this, I think people they kind of romanticize about Camarda. He's one of our own. We keep him here. We want a one-club player. I think Milan need to be in a position where they need to, one, maintain control over his career and his rights. Two, put him in the best position to develop. Because Milan Futuro is not the best position. In my opinion, he's outplayed that level of quality or that.
And they're going to be Serie D.
And they're going to be in Serie D. So you're not going to really gauge anything on how far along he is in his development by him playing in the fourth tier of Italian football.
So you might as well do Primavera again.
Correct. Right. But you also have to give him some sort of guarantees as far as minutes, because the only way you were going to be able to understand where he is, what he needs to work on, and all these sorts of things is if he plays, if he's on the pitch, if he's involved in the day-to-day training and going through the ebbs and flows of a young professional footballer who will struggle. Because if he had moments last year where we thought that he might get that goal. He had that offside goal in the Champions League. That was such a huge moment that, was unfortunately taken away from him, and rightfully so. It was offside.
Yeah.
But I think that big picture Milan fans need to look at Francesco Camarda and ask themselves, where does he go that we can maintain control, we maintain his rights, that gives him the opportunity he needs to develop and prove and show himself? And ultimately, can he come back off that and show that he's a player that Milan can rely on for the future? Because as great of a prospect he is, as great of the Euro achievements he's accomplished, all the goals he's accrued over his young tenure here in Milan's lower division, Milan's lower sectors.
Yeah,
we need first team players. We need to see what Camarda can do. And what I like about this sort of formula is, and I tweeted about it last week when there was talks of Spezia and Monza, was part of me would have been okay with him going to Serie B because it's still a step up from Serie D, obviously. He would get a pretty good amount of minutes. At Monza, he would be under Galliani. He would be under some individuals in charge that I think would give him that right opportunity. But I also feared that if he went to the wrong spot, a team that's meddling in the bottom of the part of the table, they always get desperate. In January, they always go after the 35-year-old striker because they need to stave off relegation.
That happened to Lorenzo
pushes
Colombo.
Camarda back to the bench. So I think with Lecce and them having this option in here, the option tells me this from their point of view. Their thought process is, we get the option, and the only way we're going to have an understanding on whether or not triggering that option is worth it is if we play him and he does well. We get nothing with that option if we don't understand how good the player is with us, how he fits into the team. Is the player in this amount along in his career and his development? So that, I think, gives Lecce sort of that incentive to play him, because if they play him and he does well, they have an option, and maybe Milan works out a deal where they say, hey, Lecce stays up, Camarda 5-6 goals, he does well, he shows gradual development and growth. You know what? We'll keep him there for another year. Lecce stays up. He's doing well. Maybe Lecce finishes 14th, 15th in the table. And, at least we have an understanding of that relationship with Lecce. And then we know that they're going to have his best interest to develop him. And Milan always in the back of their hand can say, we want to call him back. He's 19 or 20 years old now. And now we have a guy that has a couple years under his belt. So I understand the concern from Milan fans because they see, to your point that you led with, the option. Oh my gosh, the option. That means he's gone. Milan are only seeking pure profit and they only want to get the money and run. I understand that. And you have reason to doubt.
I don't understand that.
You have reason to doubt and diminish and discredit what this management and this director's doing. But I think if you just look at the deal in and of itself at face value, I don't think it's a bad deal for Milan, because they do, again, have the means to, one, and this was something I was talking to Ollie about from Sempre Milan, was if he plays well, Lecce could trigger the option. We don't know what the figure is. We'll probably get more on that very soon.
Yeah.
Milan can turn an immediate pure profit, right? Plus Valenza from him on their books, which, granted, that's not what people want to hear. They don't care about the profits. They want to see success on the field. Valid.
Yeah, yes.
But then also Milan can say, okay, cool. We'll take that profit. We can report that. The next year, let's say we want to call him back. Now we can call him back, and this is a player that's more refined. We can maybe work out some sort of relationship with Lecce where we go and loan other players to them, whatever the case may be. I think the bottom line is this, Martino. In this situation, Milan gets Camarda to a Serie A club, which is good. That's ultimately, you want to see him, get an understanding if he can play at that level in this league. The way that the landscape is defensively, it's a tough league for strikers and forwards. We've talked about that. And do they also maintain control of his future? Yes, they do, because they can call him back.
Exactly.
That's how I feel about it. And I don't know if anyone's going to have differing opinions. I know people have their very strong opinions. I commented it on Twitter, and people were in my comments saying, why'd we do this? Why'd we do that? And I wanted to save it for the podcast. But that's how I feel about it. I want to see the player develop. I want to see him go to a team that is going to give him minutes. And if we can see that this year at Lecce, who just seem to be on the brink of selling Kristovic, who had 11 goals and 5 assists last year, in a team that is not predominantly offensive heavy. This isn't a juggernaut on the offensive side, guys. And that guy had 11 goals, 5 assists.
So, except when they played Milan that time.
Correct.
Where we allowed them to score their first home goal.
And he gives us 5-6 goals, and he gets maybe 1,200 to 1,500 minutes, and
He'll
they
be
play him.
17 for the majority of the season, to remind people.
Yeah.
17.
Yeah.
Don't let Yamal really like kind of capture your imagination of what could and shouldn't be
Right.
for a player. So my main issue, just to quickly wrap up on this one before we get into some of the transfer rumors, for me, I tweeted out, I can't stand this management. And when I say this, I say it in terms of a footballing perspective. Because I do know Milan, it's about a deck of cards that you get, right? You get dealt a hand, just like you do in life and a situation like Camarda. In this situation, Milan hold the cards, as you said, to Francesco Camarda's future. It's not as if they sent him out and they have no chance of getting him back. That's not the case whatsoever. If anything, Milan control all of it. And there isn't going to be a situation in which he was so bad and what he showed at 17 that Lecce is going to purchase him that Milan won't get it back or won't try to get him back. So to me, I think that's the overreaction of supporters. For me, where the overreaction could reside is within myself and the club that he did go to. I understand and like your points. I respect them. I think they're right. For me, I think with strikers and younger players, it's about habits and developing good habits within good teams and playing well over the course of your career. You could also say playing in a team that struggles can develop some good habits and teach you how to do well when things are not going in your way, right? Is it ever going to get harder than playing with Lecce and trying to score goals with them? Probably not, and I hope not if he comes back to Milan in his career, because if we develop a team that can create more than Lecce, then just give up in general. I do like this from an aspect of he is playing, like you mentioned, within Serie A. He gets an opportunity within Serie A. He goes to a place where Kristovic did do something, and maybe that's also a reflection of him. I just wonder that if they struggle so much, and to what your point was within Serie B, that this club was flirting with relegation, that they get into a situation where Camarda is playing less minutes because they are that much more desperate to pick up points. You get where I'm coming at here with this? It's just I'm a little worried that this team is so fugazi that they're not going to be able to guarantee that of Camarda. And again, he could return back to Milan and he could get a bulk of good minutes within the first half of the season, right? And that is also important. I had highlighted very quickly that the amount of minutes that he played last year with Futuro and Milan in general was around 1,400 minutes spread out over the course of the season. There were only 2 instances in which he played 3 or more consecutive matches with the Futuro side, and one of which in where he played 5 matches or more, he started producing. So that level of consistency in terms of play is so important for so many young players. I just hope that we see an instance that he develops and finally gets that opportunity to score. I think we've seen that a little bit more within Italian football, not exactly at the level we would all like to see, but we're starting to see a little bit more. And I think for all parties involved here, I hope it works out.
I think
I'm
also
just
the last
skeptical.
thing too is
Go.
just kind of throwing it out on the table. His coach is going to be Marco Giampaolo, assuming this deal goes through. Now, I don't think that's a name that Milan fans are very like, wow, Marco Giampaolo, right? But I think at the same time, I think that him going to a club like Lecce could foster some good habits of being a professional at this level. Maybe a team that maybe doesn't create as many chances as some of the more offensive-minded clubs in Serie A, but the physicality, right? We're going to see how much he develops on that end. We saw that quite a bit last year. He looked like more of a man, growing into more of a man, more mature, and the body looked like it was kind of following the right path. And, is this a player that at Lecce, in order to get minutes, he's going to have to press. He's going to have to show Marco Giampaolo. So there's an element of hunger that's going to have to come from him when he's going to this. And it takes 2 to tango. This is also the player who has to agree to this move because, may I remind everybody, it looked as though that Milan were going to send him on loan to Monza back in January, and that deal broke down. Is it really the best? Would it really have been the best opportunity for him to go out to Monza on a dry loan for a team that had Nesta, got rid of him, then got Nesta back, moved on, and the team that was like almost like historically bad, and they finished last? Or do you like a team like Lecce, who again maybe doesn't wow you, But if you loan him to a team that's a little higher up in the table, right? You can't have it all. You can't have it both ways is basically what I'm saying, Martino, because how many clubs can you look at in Serie A and say with a straight face, that would have been a better opportunity for him? I don't have the list of teams in front of me. Pisa, maybe?
I would,
Maybe?
well, in Serie A, yeah. I actually would have really liked Spezia because I like what they did with Esposito. So for me, I like that sort of
Fair.
development in what they were doing. But that's Serie B. Serie
Yeah.
A, Serie A is always difficult because you know it. Most of the teams who stay up in the bottom half of the table don't play
They
modern
mostly
football.
get bounced right back down or surviving
But they also
to
play
stay up.
garbage football. Milan, I'm not, and I know it's ironic because we have Allegri as manager. It's still a totally different level. Is kind of the point. We'll see what happens. You guys let us know in the comments section on what you think of Camarda. Do you like the deal in its formula? Do you like where he is going out on loan, or where did you prefer for him to go out on loan? Okay, so going to a little bit more on the rumor side of things, Milan obviously want to keep on advancing in terms of the midfield. The track from Musa to Napoli has cooled off a little bit. We'll see what ends up happening there. Seemed like Milan were getting a little too greedy. We'll see what happens. Now, midfield issue. Luca Bianchinin basically just tweeted out that Brugge don't want to go less than 40 million for Yashari. Yashari's issue and situation with Milan is, and the way he worded it was that Milan are not used to these parameters, aka they haven't spent money on a player for that much, I believe, either since Andre Silva or Bonucci. So again, that's about 8 years ago, and then if not, further go back to Rui Costa. So it is so funny to me because it's like, yeah, it's like they're going to the fucking moon for the first time. Eventually, brothers, we're going to have to pay up money for a talented player because then we look at the Xhaka track and the Samuel Ricci track as well, Matt, where let's talk about Xhaka for a second. Tade supposedly thought that he could only pay 10 to 12 million for this player. Now, the asking price of Leverkusen on top of the wages is 12 to 15 million euro, which he thinks, I don't know if that's too much money now. So if that's too much money for a player within his 30s, then a young and hot talent like Yasari or even Ricci are too much money in certain assets. Who's the right price? And I'm saying this rhetorically, and I'm not asking you. Who is the right price then? I'd love to know because the guy that you couldn't purchase last year, that's worth a lot more now in Ricci. And I understand Cairo wanted to keep him to do exactly this, which was to price out other teams. And if not, teams probably from the Premier League might have interest and want to purchase him. I get it from the Serie A perspective in those clubs because you have to still get as much money. That's the way it goes for everybody in this sport. But however, when are you going to pay out? You just sold a player for basically guaranteed 65 million within midfield. You're selling Theo Hernandez for 30 million. And I've told people this time and time again, with the amount of money that this club is receiving, factor in Kalulu, factor in Romero, factor in Maldini, factor in some more CDK money, they're already at over 100 million. That's not including Chukwueze sale, Musa sale, one of Tamori Chow, one of Loftus-Cheek potentially.
Pobega, maybe.
Like, guys, we're talking about well over 100 million. How do you not at least, and I'm not saying like what I said before, 30 million here, 30 million there. Not even for one guy that you find so good that you say to yourself, okay, let's break the mold. Let's go and pay this much money for this player because we think he is that good. Because every single time it's this haggling game, Matt, and you know it. Javi Guerrera. We like him. They like him for 28 for 28 or 25 to 28 million. Milan are more like, we'll offer 20, maybe some bonuses.
I think initially they said Guerra was 16 plus, which
Milan's offer, yeah, but
their
like
initial, which that reportedly Valencia, and I wouldn't disagree with them, deemed it offensive. Which it's offensive for me as a fan of Milan.
I think it's offensive too because you
like,
just know
I feel offended that we're coming in and we want to build out this team and we want to get premium players and good quality players that are young, that have a couple years under their belts, that can bring some elements of maybe what Tijani brought or Tonali had and bring it into this team. And I get negotiation. I get you're not going to come here and say, hey, we're going to give you 30 million because we're going to be like, we would have taken 25. Cool, 30. And I get it, but it's the constant like nickel and diming with it. And it feels as though that this Jashari negotiation, if it does materialize, or Chaka or Ricci, whatever in general, every negotiation feels like at the end of it, you feel like you need a shower.
Yeah.
everything feels like a CDK situation where it was, I think, Leeds and Milan. Leeds were offering more for CDK, but he wanted to go to Milan, and Milan, different circumstances, Maldini, Mazzara, they were kind of beating Bruges down because they were leveraging the fact that the player wanted Milan so badly to drive the price down,
and
but
that
they
was
still paid over
pretty much
almost 35 million for him.
it was their
So
whole budget.
and that was like 70% of their budget.
Exactly.
So I think like what frustrates me the most about this is I saw you writing stuff down, and in my head I'm trying to like read it for all to register and to reach a kind of like a conclusion as to who their ideal profile is, age, experience, money, how much they want to spend. Okay. 10 million for Granit Xhaka. I'm not wowed by him, but this is a player was a cornerstone player for Bayer Leverkusen. He was one of the veteran reference points within that team. He's still at a pretty good age. This isn't a player that's 37, 38. So he will come in and effectively would be a starter for Milan, you would assume. 10 million. And they're haggling over 1 or 2 million. No, you know what? We don't want him now. And that's cool. Now they're going to go for Jashari, and they think that, or Ricci. Now they think all of a sudden Urbano Cairo is going to all of a sudden be like, we're going to give you guys a discount on Ricci. 2 weeks ago, no discount. Now we're going to give you a discount. So again, we're not privy to the inner workings and dealings of these negotiations. So we can only speak on what we're being fed by the media and then the top reporters. But the way I look at the way this summer is going to go is there's going to be a ton of names. Milan fans have to kind of roll with the punches and not fall in love with any prospect, because do you see a world where Milan spends 40 million for Jashari? He's got Premier League interest. They know, Bruges knows. We could sit back. We hold all the cards. We know Milan are desperate. They just sold a 65 million midfielder. They just sold him. They have some money. Granted,
Yeah,
they didn't win Champions League.
really literally just reported as well, 35 plus bonuses.
35 plus. You think this management is going to come in with a 35 plus offer, knowing how many changes they have to make still?
It's stupid because you have to get one player in. I'm sorry, you have to. So like, to me, I don't know, like what is the end game here? Because every single player that you're linked with, you have to pay money eventually. And also like the upside with the player, I really like the upside. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee.
So do
coming from the league that he's coming from, but everything that I've seen, so much more. Like everyone who said that he is a much bigger Benacer, I agree with. I totally see what people were talking about. And he is supposedly a Milan fan. Yeah, like it matters.
But Martino, I think the one thing it kind of boils down to in my head is Milan hasn't adjusted with the times when it comes to the market.
Oh yeah.
Seeing 35 to 40 million for a player is like 35 to 40 million for a player. How many guys are going for 35, 40 million right now?
A lot.
Quite a lot. 30 to 40 is maybe what it was years ago was 20 million. We're like a 20 million for a player.
A lot of people don't realize how much it's changed. Lukaku just went for 30 million.
If you want a Ricci now, right? Or if you want a Jashari now.
Yeah.
And he's 30 million. If you like him enough and you back your analytics team, you back the scouting, you back everything that has gone into identifying this player.
Yeah.
You do it now. You do it now and you live with the consequences of a potential flop deal. That's the thing with Milan is they were in that zone where they should have been taking the risk on a player like this. Years ago, remember how we talked about it last summer or the summer before? We were saying they got the cornerstone players. They got the players locked up. This is where Milan needs to go and they get those 2 to 3 players worth 30 to 40 million. This is where they need to get that premium, more refined player. They didn't do it. So now, because they don't have Champions League money coming in and the revenues aren't there, they're almost, we can't spend 30 million for a player. That's a little too much because what if he flops? Now we got to sell more players. Now we have more to do. That's where I feel like they're at. And if you're a selling club with Milan right now, Jashari, I'm sorry. I'd be stunned if they give, knowing, I don't know if there is the same management involved at Bruges right now. And I know it's not Maldini and Mazzara anymore. It's a Tade and Furlani, whoever. If I'm looking at Milan, I'm saying, I ain't cutting you guys discounts. I'm sorry. Unless the player's will is so strong, so profound that he wants to go to Milan and Milan only, they're going to say, well, we'll sit tight. Someone will come in for this player, because I'm a firm believer in the power of social media, and I'm a firm believer in the power of media in general, in driving prices. I firmly believe that, because if Milan are talking about these figures and they really love Jashari, and the more the name kind of gets floated out there and the more teams, oh, who's this guy? Well, let's look into him. Let's see what we want him. Milan has to be careful with how they navigate this summer, because very quickly it's July. Very quickly it's July. Milan have a lot of work to do.
To be fair, market is not open yet. I'm
I
not
understand that.
giving
You
an
still need
excuse
to
to anybody.
You still need to develop the
I
framework
understand
of
that,
deals.
but I'm just saying, for some people, like, it's still not officially open yet.
It's still
So
not open, but I think, again, Martino,
they can't buy anybody because it's not.
I know, new coach, new director. Fans will riot if they don't see deals kind of getting over the line.
They're gonna riot regardless. I understand what you're saying, but like, I'm just saying, from the angle of the fans, we know it. We deal with them. We love all of you for the most part. Everyone in here that views us, we love you. But guys, we know you're gonna freak out regardless. We see the Camarda loan, and they think he's gone for good. The amount of replies. He's like, we just sold him away forever. Relax. Can you read for a moment? Calm down. Not everything is absolutely the worst. Please, please. I'm not saying trust Redbird. I'm not saying this management's great. I've repeated that time and time again.
Let me ask you this, Martino. Of the three names on the bottom, take out fee for just a little while. Because I think, truthfully, we need at least probably two of these, right? 2 or 3, or at least similar players. As my dogs are in the background, I apologize for that if it's coming through.
They're fine.
Of the three, who do you feel like the strongest about, like that we would need? Whether it be Shaka for 15, Jashari for 35, 40, Ricci for 30 million. Who do you feel out of these three that you're like, that's the guy I want? Of the three, that's the guy I feel like Milan need to have.
I don't even like that question, because it's just not, because it's not just one, because one is just like dumb for me. You know what I mean? Like, if they were to get one and they get
Jashari or Ricci,
I would take Jashari because it's a higher upside player.
You don't have concerns over the fact that he hasn't played in the league? You don't think Ricci's background?
No, because I've seen what I've seen Jashari play well in the Champions League.
We saw De Ketelaere play good in the Champions League,
and then De Ketelaere does well with another team, and in the same league, where we saw that he could have potential with, that he hit post multiple times, that his teammates missed tons of chances as well. It wasn't just completely like him sucking with Milan. If we go back and look at a lot of the stuff, he was rather unfortunate. He also wasn't given time because the people who bought him got fired immediately. That's a different situation. Ricci, he's been in Serie A for quite some time. I like him, sure, but we're also talking about the same exact price. And so when we're talking about same exact price, for me, 35 million for someone who's considerably younger, I go with upside. Because if I want a guarantee, then I'm paying for Granit Xhaka for 20 million less. I'd rather pay the 20 million less than what Ricci is. And I like all three players. But this Ricci thing with the price, I've said it time and time, I'm not paying 35 million for him. This is ridiculous for a player that is close to his ceiling already. And it's not even a slight on him. I like him. Good player. But Milan, where they are in their current position, if you're spending that sort of coin, it's either has to be a real guarantee that he's really good.
Also, about Ricci, I think it also says a lot. Again, we're not privy to interest around Italy and abroad, but it says a lot that you're not seeing a lot of teams within Serie A sort of like chomping at the bit to get Ricci.
Well, that's abroad. Because they're priced out, and as like it's the same thing with Fratesi for me. And I liked Fratesi in general as a player, but what he was asked for, it was like nearly 40 million.
40 million, yeah.
And I'm just sitting there like, okay, I like this player. He's a decent player. But what are we talking about fee-wise? And again, I've said this, 50 million euro release clause for Rovella is a better deal than Ricci for 35 million. And I will stand by that. I'm not saying Milan are going to do that. But if you're telling me what I would do with like figures-wise, that's what I would do. But also what we do here and what we think never plays into the reality of what this management and ownership is. So I'm not even trying to be like, you're wasting my time. We're playing fantasy football here in a way. We
Yeah.
know it's not gonna, because like I get like, and I'm not even to feed into the drama. People from other YouTube channels that I had to clarify with them on stuff that we never said. It's like, if we, what the way we operate on this channel and what we talk about on our podcast are mostly in the realm of what Redbird are going to do and what this management is going to do, not what we want. We are outspoken about what we want on a consistent basis, but we're not going to get what we want under this ownership. So we have to operate under their ideology in when we're talking about possible scenarios, not because we like these scenarios. So just to clarify that. And the final point and topic here is someone that I still don't think this is going to happen, because of wages, because of what Arsenal would require within a fee, is Zinchenko to Milan as a potential replacement for Theo Hernandez. And this player has declined massively. There are other stuff that some people tend to find controversial. I'm not really going to get into all that. That's not my forte, so I'm just not going to comment on it. What I would say is that this makes no sense from the standpoint of age, upside. The only thing is that he plays the same position. And I just don't really see this as something that I want to rock with any further. So for me, Zinchenko for me is a no to Milan. I don't think this deal gets done. I just think it's floated out there because Arsenal are looking to offload a player and it fits into the position. Milan have had loose contacts with Arsenal over this. A context could be, hey, I called you up, I inquired about a price. Doesn't mean anything is advancing. Nothing that we've seen is advancing. Your thoughts on Zinchenko from Arsenal to Milan?
Yeah, it doesn't really do anything for me. It doesn't get me excited. He's 28. He kind of has been, regressing, at least kind of fading into more of the background at Liverpool. I mean, this past season, he's made 15 appearances in the league, 1 assist. I think, just reading off some stats, he had 522 minutes played, which, again, for going from a player that was so durable for you that regardless of his, regression and some of the things that kind of came with Theo and the baggage, he posted. He was there. He was always able to play at left back, and you could pencil him in your starting 11 without, concern. With Zinchenko, 28, he hasn't really shown he can play consistently. Again, granted, things can change if he goes to a slower league like Serie A is versus the Premier League. Maybe you can play him a little bit more. Maybe he is a little bit more dependable, reliable in that sense. And Milan only have the one competition. So I don't know. I think the wages are always going to be a concern when you're buying from the Premier League. We know that unless the player's so keen on joining Milan like Pulisic was, I think this I don't think this deal gets done. I think Milan are gonna get a left back. Maybe, who knows? You might even see a guy like Jimenez at left back, and they might maybe try to go for a right back. I don't truthfully really know all that much at this point, but I just don't see Zinchenko. I don't think that he's someone that would excite me enough to be a replacement for Theo Hernandez. On top of the fact that I think it would be a little bit more of a headache, financially to bring that player in, and I think there's a little bit more risk with that because 28, not the greatest injury history or injury record or health record, and you're bringing him in and you're going to spend, what, 20 million, give or take, plus the wages? It kind of reeks of like a Ruben Loftus-Cheek type deal for me. That's me. But people might have their own feelings. I know he can play maybe a little bit in the midfield. I know that's something that shout out Pet, who's a big Arsenal fan, someone that we worked with at State of Play
former co-host of State of Play Pod.
Yeah. But maybe he was kind of supporting and championing his own player because he wants us to buy him from him. That's kind of what it feels like. But yeah, Zinchenko doesn't really wow me, and it doesn't feel like the replacement that we should be looking for.
Yeah, I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say regarding that. We appreciate you guys so much and the support that you guys have given us, especially during these warm times during the summer. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow us everywhere, That Milan Podcast. Go and check out the latest episode with Enrico Silvestrin. Go check out his channel, subscribe to him. Also go and check out the latest video that I did, the solo video on Theo Hernandez. Give some feedback if you want some more of those videos, because Matt and I don't always have a schedule to sync up to do the episode and cover every topic. So sometimes I'll be able to do that. Again, TikTok is killing it. I think we are about 4 followers away from, I got us almost to 1,000. I believe we're at like 996 right now. So to get us to 1,000 would just be awesome. It's just been a lot of good hard work on there and trying to create a lot of content. Obviously, getting clips is what I was writing down in case Santangelo was wondering, because he thought I was doing some accounting on my notepad here. But again, we appreciate you guys so much. Please like, subscribe, comment, follow us, and subscribe on our other channel at That Milan Pod. Again, check out everything over there. We greatly appreciate all of you. Spotify, give us 5 stars. Apple as well, is where you can download the audio version of the podcast if you just want to listen in. But other than that, we appreciate you guys so much. We'll keep you posted on next week regarding a podcast. It's going to be a holiday over here in the States. We'll try and get one done around earlier in the week. But other than that, we appreciate you guys so much. Take care.